Welcome back to our channel, English with Ethan. In this video, we will take you on a powerful journey through the true story of the Titanic. This story is not just about a ship, it's about dreams, hopes, and a tragedy that touched the whole world. It's perfect for English reading practice and learning English through storytelling. So stay with us as we begin this 6-part journey. Let's start with Part 1. The Dream Ship Begins. Once upon a time, there was a dream. In the early 1900s, people wanted to travel faster, in style, and with great comfort. Big companies were competing to build the most powerful and most luxurious ships. One company, called White Star Line, decided to build a ship that would be the largest and most beautiful in the world. They named it Titanic. The Titanic was more than just a ship. It was a floating palace. It was called the Ship of Dreams. Some said it was unsinkable, meaning it could never sink. People believed it was the safest ship ever made. The making of Titanic construction of the Titanic began in 1909 in Belfast, Northern Ireland. Thousands of workers worked day and night to build the massive ship. It was 882 feet long, 175 feet tall, and weighed over 46,000 tons. Titanic had 9 decks and could carry over 2,200 passengers and crew. The ship was built using the latest technology of that time. It had powerful engines, strong steel walls, and many safety features. There were 16 watertight compartments. People believed that even if 4 compartments were damaged, the Titanic would still float. Luxury on the sea. The Titanic had 3 classes of passengers: first class, second class, and third class. First-class passengers were the richest people, businessmen, celebrities, and even nobles. They enjoyed grand dining rooms, libraries, a swimming pool, and even a gym. Second class had nice rooms and decent food. These were mostly teachers, writers, and middle-class families. Third-class passengers, also called steerage, were mostly poor immigrants who dreamed of a better life in America. Their rooms were small and simple, but the Titanic was still better than other ships. Everyone on board was excited. Some were going on holiday, some were returning home, and many were chasing their dreams. Titanic's captain and crew. The captain of the Titanic was Captain Edward Smith. He was one of the most experienced sea captains of that time. This was going to be his final journey before retirement. Many believed that with him in charge, everything would be fine. There were over 800 crew members on board. They worked in different departments: engine room, kitchen, cleaning, and taking care of passengers. Everyone had a role to make the Titanic run smoothly. The voyage begins, April 10th, 1912. Finally, on April 10th, 1912, Titanic left from Southampton, England. It was going to sail to New York City, USA. People cheered as the ship slowly moved out of the harbor. It made 2 quick stops at Cherbourg, France, and Queenstown, Ireland, to pick up more passengers. Now Titanic was fully loaded with people from all walks of life, rich and poor, young and old, all sharing the same ship, but living in very different ways. The sky was clear. The sea was calm. People were happy. No one knew what was coming next. Part 2. Life on board. Titanic's beautiful days at sea. First impressions. As soon as passengers entered the Titanic, they were amazed. The first-class passengers walked into a grand hall filled with shining lights, golden railings, and beautiful carpets. The staircase was like one in a royal palace. People had never seen such beauty on a ship before. Each class had different areas. First-class areas looked like hotels. Second-class areas were simple but comfortable. Third-class areas were basic, but many third-class passengers still felt lucky to be on such a ship. Dining and food on the Titanic was another big highlight. First-class passengers enjoyed 10-course meals. They ate dishes like roast duck, beef, chicken, soups, and special desserts. Waiters served them on fine plates with silver forks and spoons. Second-class passengers also had good food, including roast meats, vegetables, and puddings. Third-class passengers had simpler food like bread, butter, soup, and boiled potatoes. But it was still better than what they were used to. Each class had its own dining room. First-class passengers even had live music playing while they ate. Entertainment and fun people on the Titanic were not bored. There were many things to do, especially for first-class passengers. They walked on large open decks, read books in the library, or played card games. There was even a gym with bicycles, rowing machines, and an electric horse. A group of musicians played music every day. Their soft, sweet music made the evenings peaceful. Some passengers danced. Others simply sat and watched the sea. Children played with toys or ran around the deck. Families took walks and talked with others. People shared their stories, laughed, and made new friends. Dreams and hopes of the passengers. Most people on the Titanic were not just traveling for fun. Many of them had dreams. Some were going to America to start a new life. Some were going to meet their families after many years. Some had found jobs in New York and wanted to build a future. For these people, the Titanic was not just a ship. It was a bridge between the old life and a new beginning. Passengers in third class often talked about how they would find work, build homes, and bring their families later. They were full of hope. The work of the crew. The Titanic had over 800 crew members. They had different jobs. Some worked in the engine rooms where it was hot and noisy. Some worked as waiters and stewards, serving food in cleaning rooms. Some were officers and sailors who looked after the ship's direction and safety. The crew worked hard every day to make sure the passengers were comfortable. They followed orders strictly. Everyone respected Captain Edward Smith, who was calm and serious about safety. Evenings on the ship. At night, the sky over the ocean was full of stars. The sea was quiet. The ship moved smoothly. People sat on deck chairs covered in blankets, looking at the stars and talking quietly. It felt peaceful, safe. No one imagined anything could go wrong. The Titanic was the strongest ship in the world, they said. But far away, hidden in the dark sea, were dangers no one could see. April 11th to 13th, 1912. Calm days before the storm. The Titanic sailed smoothly for 3 days. It passed through calm seas. Every day felt like a holiday. People sent letters, took photographs, and enjoyed life. But during those days, ice warnings began to come in. Other ships sent messages saying they had seen icebergs in the North Atlantic. These warnings were sent to the Titanic's wireless room. The operators received them, but the ship kept moving forward at full speed, 22.5 knots. Why? Because the ship was behind schedule. The company wanted to reach New York quickly. They believed the Titanic was too strong to be harmed. This was the last peaceful day. The calm before the storm. On the evening of April 14th, the air began to feel colder. The ship entered icy waters. Some passengers noticed it was freezing on the deck. Still, the music played. The passengers danced and smiled. Some were playing cards. Others were writing letters. Crew members were doing their final checks. Everyone was busy with their own lives. No one knew they were just a few hours away from the greatest sea disaster in history. Part 3. The night of the disaster, when the Titanic hit the iceberg. The evening of April 14th, 1912. It was a cold and quiet night. The sky was full of stars. The sea looked like a mirror. It was unusually calm, with no waves at all. Many people said it felt strange. Passengers in first class were finishing their late dinners. Some were still listening to music. The band had just played one of the popular songs of the time, Autumn. In second and third class, passengers were getting ready for bed. Some were writing in their diaries. Children were already asleep. Everything felt peaceful and safe. But deep inside the ship, in the wireless room, warnings were being received. Other ships had sent messages. Ice ahead. But Titanic's 2 wireless operators were very busy. They were sending personal messages for the rich passengers. Some warnings were passed on, some were ignored. One message from a nearby ship named Californian was even answered rudely. Keep off. I am busy. No one guessed that these warnings were the last chance to stop the disaster. The temperature drops. As the ship moved forward, the temperature kept falling. It went below freezing. Ice began to form on the railings and decks. Some passengers stepped outside for fresh air but quickly went back inside. It was too cold. The sea was black and endless. Lookouts were placed at the front of the ship in the crow's nest. They were watching carefully for any signs of danger. But they had no binoculars. It had been locked away by mistake. They had to use only their eyes to scan the dark waters. The fatal moment. 11:40 p.m. Suddenly, at 11:40 p.m., one of the lookouts saw something large in the water. It was dark and still, but it looked like a mountain. He rang the warning bell 3 times and picked up the phone to the bridge. He said, "Iceberg right ahead." The officer on the bridge quickly gave orders. Hard to starboard. Turn the wheel. Stop engines. Stop the ship. But it was too late. The Titanic was too big and moving too fast. It couldn't turn in time. The side of the ship scraped against the iceberg. The sound wasn't loud, but it was enough. The iceberg tore open 5 watertight compartments along the ship's right side. That was more than Titanic could handle. Water started rushing in. She is hurt badly. At first, most passengers didn't feel anything. Some had heard a noise, like a soft grinding. Others felt the ship shake a little. A few people got out of bed. They asked the crew what was happening. The crew told them not to worry. Everything is fine, they said. But down below, the situation was getting worse. In the boiler rooms, men saw water flooding the floors. Steam rose. Alarms rang. The engineers and firemen began to understand. The ship was in real danger. Captain Edward Smith was called to the bridge. After checking with the ship's designer, Thomas Andrews, the truth became clear. The Titanic was going to sink. They had 2 to 3 hours, no more. Warnings and confusion. Still, passengers were not told the full truth. The crew started waking people up quietly. They asked them to come on deck and wear life jackets, just in case. Some passengers laughed. Some refused to get out of bed. Others asked, why? The ship feels fine. But the water was already rising fast in the lower levels. Third-class passengers found it hard to get out. Many of their doors were locked or hard to open. They struggled to find their way through the dark hallways. The ship was not fully prepared for an emergency. Lifeboat drills had not been done properly. The crew was confused. There were not enough lifeboats for everyone. Launching the lifeboats. At 12:15 a.m., the crew was ordered to start preparing the lifeboats, but the process was slow. Each lifeboat could carry 60 to 70 people, but many were launched half-empty. Why? Because people thought the ship was still safer than a small boat. Some crew didn't know how many people the boats could safely hold. First-class passengers were allowed to go first. The rule was, women and children first. But this was not always followed. Some men got in early. Others followed the rules and stayed back. The band plays on. As panic slowly spread, the Titanic's musicians did something beautiful and brave. They took out their instruments and began to play. They played calm, sweet music to help keep people relaxed. Many said they played until the very end. The last song they played is still debated. Some say it was a Christian hymn, "Nearer, my God, to Thee." Their music brought comfort to many. People cried, prayed, and held hands as they listened. It was a moment of beauty in a time of fear. Time running out. By 1:30 a.m., the ship was leaning more. The front part, bow, was going deeper into the water. People were now scared. More lifeboats were being launched. But there were only a few left. The back of the ship was rising. Dishes, furniture, and people began sliding down the floor. Lights flickered. Some passengers jumped into the freezing sea. Others held onto anything they could. The Titanic was dying. Part 4. The final hours. Courage, sacrifice, and silence. The clock ticks. Past midnight after 1:30 a.m., everything started to move faster. The ship was now tilting heavily. People had to hold on to the railings to stay standing. Some fell. Some screamed. Some just stood still, too shocked to move. The front of the ship was already underwater. Cold water rushed through the lower decks. It reached bedrooms, hallways, and staircases. Some people were trapped. Others tried to find higher ground. In the engine rooms, the workers were still doing their job. They kept the electricity running so the lights would stay on. They knew they would die, but they chose to help others. That's true bravery. Lifeboats are almost gone by now. Almost all lifeboats were gone. The few left were being loaded quickly. People were desperate. Women and children were still given first place, but some families didn't want to be separated. Mothers refused to leave their husbands. Fathers cried as they put their children into lifeboats. Some boys, just 13 or 14 years old, were told, "You're a man now, stay behind." There was no more order. People were pushing, some were shouting, others were praying. On the upper decks, crew members had guns. They used them in the air to stop crowds from rushing the lifeboats. In some sad moments, they had to choose who would live and who would not. The freezing cold. The temperature outside was below zero. The sea was icy and the wind was sharp like a knife. Those who had jumped into the water were shivering and struggling. They screamed for help, but the lifeboats had moved away. The crew feared the boats would be pulled down by the sinking ship if they stayed close. In just a few minutes, the cold killed people. The human body can't survive long in such freezing water. One by one, voices became quiet. The captain's last decision. Captain Edward Smith, the leader of the Titanic, stayed on board. He walked around calmly, helping people. Some say he said, "Be British. Be brave." In his final moments, he was seen going into the bridge, the control room of the ship. He stood alone as water rushed in. He died with his ship. Rich and poor, all the same. On that night, money didn't matter. Rich people in first class, like John Jacob Astor, one of the richest men in the world, died just like many poor workers in third class. Astor helped his young wife into a lifeboat, kissed her, and said, "I'll see you soon." He never did. His body was found later in the water. Another rich man, Benjamin Guggenheim, took off his life jacket and put on his best clothes. He said, "We are dressed in our best and ready to go down like gentlemen." His words showed that in the face of death, even the richest accepted their fate. Love in the last moments. There were also beautiful stories of love. An elderly couple, Ida and Isidore Strauss, had the chance to get into a lifeboat. But Isidore said he wouldn't go while women and children were still waiting. His wife refused to leave him. She said, "We have lived together for many years. Where you go, I go." They sat together on deck, holding hands, waiting for the end. The ship's designer Thomas Andrews, the man who designed the Titanic, also stayed behind. He helped women and children get into lifeboats. He gave up his life jacket. One survivor said she saw him standing alone, deep in thought, as the ship was sinking. He knew this was the end. The ship breaks apart. At around 2:15 a.m., a loud cracking noise was heard. The Titanic was under too much stress. The back part lifted into the sky. Then the giant ship broke into two. The front part sank quickly. The back stayed up for a short time, then followed. Lights went out. Darkness covered the sea. Silence followed. Thousands of people were in the water, but only a few lifeboats returned to help. Most survivors said this was the hardest part, hearing the screams and being unable to help. Silence on the sea. By 2:30 a.m., the Titanic was completely gone. The sea looked empty again. The stars still shone in the sky. But the water was full of people, most of them silent now. Only 705 people were saved out of more than 2,200. Part 5. Survival, Rescue, and the World's Reaction. Floating in the cold darkness. After the Titanic disappeared into the dark sea, only a few lifeboats floated in the wide, empty ocean. It was freezing cold. Most people were wet, tired, and shivering. Some held on to hope. Others were in shock. No one truly believed what had just happened. Many in the lifeboats looked back at the black water. They had lost their family, friends, and the great ship they thought was unsinkable. Some passengers whispered prayers. Others cried quietly. The sea was silent again, but the silence felt heavier than any sound. Waiting for rescue. For hours, the survivors in lifeboats waited. They were not sure if any help would come. Some people were injured. Some were barefoot or without warm clothes. A few lifeboats were too crowded, while others had only a few people. Most survivors were women and children, sitting close together to stay warm. In one lifeboat, a newborn baby was wrapped in a blanket. In another, an elderly woman tried to keep her daughter awake so she wouldn't fall asleep and die from the cold. The lifeboats had no food, no water, and no lights. All they had was hope. The Carpathia arrives. Around 4 a.m., a ship called RMS Carpathia came into view. It had received Titanic's distress call many hours earlier and rushed through dangerous ice fields to help. When survivors saw the Carpathia's lights, they cried, shouted, and waved whatever they had in their hands. Finally, help was here. It took hours to bring everyone from the lifeboats onto the Carpathia. Some were too weak to climb. Ropes and blankets were used to pull them up. The crew of the Carpathia gave them warm clothes, hot drinks, and medical care. Survivors were hugging each other, thankful just to be alive. What survivors lost? The survivors didn't only lose their loved ones, they also lost everything they owned. Money, clothes, letters, photos, and dreams. All were gone with the ship. One young girl asked, "Where is Papa?" Her mother didn't know what to say. Another boy kept asking about his dog that was left behind on the Titanic. People were emotionally broken. Some refused to eat. Others could not sleep for days. Even when they were safe, the pain did not go away. Arrival in New York. The Carpathia reached New York City on April 18, 1912, 3 days after picking up the survivors. Crowds waited at the dock. Reporters, family members, and curious people filled the streets. Some were there to meet loved ones. Others came to hear the story. As the ship pulled in, survivors cried again. They were back on land, but not as the same people. Their hearts were heavy. Doctors helped the sick. Churches opened their doors. Volunteers gave clothes, food, and a place to rest. The world reacts. When news spread that the Titanic had sunk, the whole world was shocked. How could the unsinkable ship go down? Why were there not enough lifeboats? Who is to blame? These were the questions everyone asked. Newspapers around the world printed stories and photos of the tragedy. Some survivors were interviewed. Others stayed silent. People were angry and heartbroken. The rich and powerful had failed to protect lives. Many asked for justice. Investigations begin. The governments of Britain and the United States started investigations. Witnesses were called. Survivors shared their painful memories. Crew members told what they had seen and done. Important truths came out. The Titanic had only 20 lifeboats, not enough for everyone. Some lifeboats were lowered half empty. Warnings about icebergs had been ignored. Some crew were not trained to handle lifeboats. These facts shocked the world even more. People wanted change. Big changes in shipping rules. The Titanic tragedy led to new safety laws for all ships. 1. More lifeboats. Ships must carry enough for all passengers. 2. 24/7 radio operators, so no message would be missed. 3. Ice Patrol, a group to watch for icebergs and warn ships. 4. Regular safety drills, so everyone knows what to do in danger. These changes saved thousands of lives in the years to come. Remembering the Lost memorials were built around the world to honor those who died. In Southampton, England, where many crew members came from, families left flowers near a large memorial. In Canada, hundreds of victims were buried in cemeteries, many with no names, just numbers. Books, poems, and songs were written. People wanted the world to remember. Even today, more than 100 years later, the name Titanic is still known across the globe. Part 6. Mysteries, Myths, and the Lessons of Titanic. Was Titanic warned? One big question is, why didn't Titanic slow down? There were 6 warnings about icebergs sent to Titanic by other ships on that night. But the captain did not stop. The ship continued at full speed. Many experts believe this was a huge mistake. Why did the captain ignore the warnings? Some say he trusted the ship too much. Others believe he was trying to reach New York faster, to make headlines. It reminds us that being overconfident can be dangerous. No matter how smart or strong we are, we must stay careful. The mystery of the ship's break. When Titanic sank, many survivors said the ship broke in half. But the White Star Line, the company that owned Titanic, said the ship went down in one piece. For decades, people argued about this. Who was telling the truth? In 1985, when the shipwreck was found under the ocean, it was clear. The ship did break in two. Survivors were right. This shows that we must listen to people who were really there, even if we don't believe them at first. Was Titanic cursed? Some believe the Titanic was cursed. Here are some strange things people talk about. A mummy from Egypt was said to be on board. People believed it brought bad luck. Some workers saw the number 390904 on the ship. In a mirror, it looked like no pope, which scared religious people. The Titanic's name was never written on the lifeboats, which was against the rules. The ship was called unsinkable again and again, as if tempting fate. Though these things are just stories, they show how people try to make sense of a tragedy. The missing treasure. Some believe Titanic was carrying hidden treasures. Rich people were on board. Some had gold, diamonds, and art. It's said that a rare painting worth millions was lost. Others speak of business secrets that sank with the ship. Till today, divers and explorers have tried to find these lost items, but the deep sea has kept many secrets hidden. Titanic in dreams and warnings. Some people say they had dreams about the Titanic sinking before it happened. A young girl wrote in her diary that she dreamed of a shipwreck. A crew member quit the ship one day before it sailed, saying he had a bad feeling. A man named William Stead, a writer, was on the ship. He had written stories about ship disasters, and then died in one himself. These stories make the Titanic feel like more than just history, like a story full of mystery and fate. The unknown child. When Titanic sank, a small baby's body was found in the water. No one knew who he was. He was buried in Canada and called the unknown child. For years, people brought flowers to his grave. In 2007, with the help of science, DNA, the child was identified as Sidney Leslie Goodwin, just 19 months old. His entire family died on the Titanic. This was one of the saddest parts of the story, but also a reminder that every person matters, even if the world forgets their name for a while. Why Titanic still matters. You may ask, why are we still talking about Titanic after more than 100 years? Because it teaches us so many life lessons. 1. Pride can be dangerous. Titanic was called unsinkable, but it still sank. We must always stay humble. 2. Always be prepared. The ship did not have enough lifeboats. In life, we must be ready for problems. 3. Life is short. Hundreds of people had big dreams, but their journey ended too soon. We must value every day. 4. People are equal in the end. Rich or poor, everyone was in danger. In times of trouble, money and power cannot save us. 5. Love matters. Many people gave up their place on the boat for their loved ones. That kind of love is the most powerful. Titanic in movies and books. Titanic's story has inspired books, documentaries, and films. The most famous is the 1997 film Titanic, starring Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet. It became one of the highest-grossing movies in history. But more than money or fame, The movie showed the world how deep and real the Titanic tragedy was. It made young people interested in the story again and helped us remember the human part of the disaster. What we can learn as English learners. Even as we study English, Titanic teaches us that stories help us learn. History is not just facts, it's emotion, people, and life. That we should read and listen deeply to understand both language and meaning. That every voice matters, even the quiet ones in the lifeboats. So as you grow your English skills, remember, you are also learning about the world, about emotions, and about how to tell powerful stories. Final thoughts. Titanic was a beautiful dream that became a sad reality. But even in its fall, it left behind light, lessons that still shine today. May we remember those who were lost, respect those who survived, and grow from the story they gave us. And may we, like a good ship, sail through our lives not thinking we are unsinkable, but knowing we are ready. Thank you for joining us on this long journey through the Titanic story. If you're learning English through these stories, this is the perfect way to grow your skills, your heart, and your mind. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this with someone who wants to learn English with real and emotional stories.